experience, experience, experience. Is there a business case for the young men and women who are seated here, who are both technical and they have a variety of skills in the oil and gas sector? Is there a business case for them? How do we incentivize local domestic employment? Mr. Mark, do you mind to start?
Good afternoon and thank you very much. As said, my name is Malcolm and I'm honored to be part of this panel. Is there a business case? I think yes, there is. I'll take us back to something that was once said by one of the previous speakers, Dr. Gaduru. A couple of years ago, he said to us when we just started to take an interest in the oil and gas sector, he said to us that the one thing we cannot target is the oil and gas sector on its own as a single marketplace for the skills that we are developing. It was suggested that we need to find skills that can be used in other industries and opportunities that work across the board. Now, I'll use that to, and perhaps I'll stretch it a little bit, to an area that was touched on earlier by the Honorable Francis Kimemia in the Big Four agenda, which one doesn't necessarily think of oil and gas as the Big Four agenda in the same statement. But then chances are that the welding skills you're going to need, the electrician skills that you're going to need in oil and gas are the same ones that are going to be needed in manufacturing, are the same ones that are going to be needed in construction or infrastructure, whether in housing, and the same quality assurance that's going to be needed in oil and gas to make sure we are delivering quality products to the industry are the same ones that are needed in all of these other sectors if we are actually to lead from our country.
Very well. Thank you, Marco. But Eva, if I'm sitting there as an economist, I'm like, you know what? Let me focus on the now. The future will take care of itself, right? Is there a business case? If you're sitting there as Brian Muriki, would you invest in the young talent that is coming up, or would you rather go for ready-made products?
I think we already are investing in young talent coming up. Within the Landing Foundation, we've been supporting the extractives industry since 2006, and now we're seeing some of the fruits of the labor of that work. Because we need to realize our youth are not our future, they're our present. They are what we will hire. They are who are going to start the small businesses that we're going to give local procurement opportunities. And so we need to think of them as our now rather than our future. We need to think about what we are doing now, and that's part of what the Foundation's focus has been in working with local institutions, TIVET institutions, but also supporting local SMEs in Turkana region. Because we need to realize even these SMEs are the ones who are going to hire the technicians who come out of them, who graduate from TIVET institutions. These skills are transferable, just as my colleague here has said. We need to also take advantage of the oil and gas sectors, not just to rely on the direct opportunities, but the indirect and induced opportunities from the sector.
But Prof, that's where the problem is. Because I want you to comment on the uptake of the courses that you're offering at Moringa. Has it been very receptive? Yes or no, and why?
No, thank you very much, Mohammed, and my colleagues. Now, Moringa Institute, which is only about 1 year old, is a concept actually of the Northern Corridor Integration Project. 4 countries started that: Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, and South Sudan. And I think later, Ethiopia and joined. So we could say safely, Tanzania I think is not decided yet. So as a center of excellence, of course, for capacity building in oil and gas, so the job was given to the Kenyan government to spearhead that, and they delegated to Kenya Pipeline Company because he's already in the pipeline business. And so when the institute started, the first thing Kenya Pipeline thought about was, let's first start with our core business of Kenya Pipeline, which is pipeline. So we are looking at mechanical instrumentation control, things like laboratory technology, because we deliver products, so we have to analyze these products. Operations itself is there, fire officer is there, so forth and so on. So for now, we're training Kenya pipeline staff who probably want to change jobs from one place to another, but also most important, we are also positioning ourselves to be able to open the doors to others. Welding I didn't mention. Right now we've got an Australian company that is training welding here in Kenya pipeline at the industrial area. So the question is the uptake good enough so far coming from communities other than the Kenya pipeline staff? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, when it started, there was a lot of interest. And then after some time, they realized the cost is too high. So the uptake kind of dropped. Because the first thing is that, are you going to give me a job? I'm going to pay 100,000 to train in 2 months. Will you give me a job? And of course, if you can't give them a job, they'll go and spread. And they are learning very expensive courses because oil and gas is very expensive business.
Absolutely.
But then the question is uptake. So our next strategy right now is to partner with possible and potential employers, so that at least we can say we've trained 5 people and they have been absorbed. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. To the honorable peers, we have TVET institutions nowadays offering MAs or BAs in political science. Honestly, where are we getting it wrong? Where are we getting it wrong?
So I need you to be aware of many things as far as the transformation of this sector is concerned. First of all, the competency-based education and training system, which guarantees 100% quality and relevance, has been established at a national level. The second is that we're trying to reduce the cost of training, so that combined effort through a bursary as well as government capitation will promote the maximum 100% access to these institutions, which means that they're fully funded students. Yes. The third thing I need you to consider and be aware of is that the Kenya Qualifications National Framework will be gazetted, hopefully by the end of this week, which creates the interlinks throughout the entire national educational system and promotes a level structure and is a governance structure which interfaces labour market requirements. The fourth thing is that we're delinking from the Teacher Service Commission, where we are seeing how we can promote the maximum level of competency in our trainers. And so the system is now open for support and further development as we ensure that the trainers themselves are relevant and ensure that they have the highest level of capacity towards promoting competency-based education and training. The net output from all of this, all these efforts, will ensure that we have transferable skills. That the skills will also promote multiplier opportunities around the initiatives. It's not necessarily just the oil and gas or the mining, but the development around it in terms of towns and cities and restaurants and other key areas, which is a major opportunity. But what's required is, if you are from some of these mega projects, there's a very clear commitment of how many employees you require, what are their levels, what sort of qualifications they are required. Then that would feed into the national system to provide capacity. Going ahead, there are 3 further things that I'd like to mention. That we're focusing on promoting centres of excellence in welding, in all the skill areas. We're also focusing on sector centres of excellence. These centres of excellence require a direct interface to panels and individuals like yourselves, because they're multi-stakeholder input in order to ensure that we get the right kind of quality and relevance of these centres of excellence with respect to the link of skills and sectors. We're focusing heavily on quality assurance and governance of these institutions. There again, infrastructure projects and most interestingly, the TVET ecosystem that you'll see from now henceforth will be a co-created environment between the micro, small, medium enterprises themselves, which will then provide potential opportunities for gainful employment as well as self-employment, and the promotion of how infrastructure project providers also create an ecosystem for micro, small, medium enterprises. So I think that a lot is going on, and I think that the starting point is the commitment. The commitment in terms of numbers, qualities, the locations, and so on. And then the system will respond.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. To the Tari, from a technical perspective, and you sitting there as the coordinator of Tibet, right? What is the level of transferability, knowing very well that Kenya runs a very, very green economy? So to the students who are sitting in the audience, is there a level of transferability between what we know as renewables and oil and gas?
Now, just before I answer that, I can briefly talk about the fact that as Kenyans are getting excited about exploration and exploitation of oil, there are a number of countries, especially in the West, which are actually running away from the use of oil and are actually replacing the fossil fuels with renewable energy. And that is basically because of the fact that there are a lot of environmental hazards as well as health hazards that is actually associated with the fossil fuels. And therefore, as we move in to the exploitation of the fossil fuels, and especially the petroleum fuels in this case, I would actually encourage the fact that we should also be thinking about possibilities of blending it with other biofuels. And one of the biofuels that we can talk about is biodiesel, and you can also talk about bioethanol. Now, the moment you start the blending process of these fuels, then automatically we are going to reduce the hazardous effects of these fuels. And in addition to that, we will also be able to improve on our environment. This is basically because of the fact that most of the biofuels are actually obtained from plants. And therefore, if we do a lot of that blending, then it will mean that we will also increase the level of our land which is actually under the forests. And once we do that, those forests will eventually absorb the carbon dioxide which is going to be emitted by the fossil fuels as we use them either for transport or in our industries. And once we do this, then we'll actually be able to benefit from the petroleum fuels that we are actually excited about. And eventually, it is my belief that since these fuels are actually fuels which will eventually become depleted in future, if we invest in the biofuels and even in the renewable fuels, then once the fossil fuels become depleted, we'll still have another source that we can still rely on.
Very well. Very well. To Mr. Andrew, when working with the Islam College and of course the Choga Foundation in Uganda, what has been the reception of some of your projects or some of the training aspects, both in Kenya and Uganda?
Well, I would say, being a trustee of Strasbourg Professional Trust, we have been always looking to cover the needs of the country.
Okay.
And that's Strasbourg University. In the year 2003, we began thinking what else can be done for the benefit of the people. And you remember, 2005, 2006, there was a move of converting the middle college into universities. And we saw this niche. There is need for the middle level colleges. And we have also the 2030 vision of industrialization. There is no industrialization without middle level trained people. So we began this College of Technology. And thinking what was the model that has succeeded in the world on vocational training, we thought first away this competence-based training and education. And the model that has been used of the Germany, the dual training. So we try to implement the dual training in Islam College of Technology, meaning that the student has two places of study, the college and the industry. So the student is incorporated in the industry. So that means also that the courses that we organize are industry-driven at a certain industry. When we go to place the students in the industry, we say, this is a young man who is going to work, it's a worker. It's not an attaché, because there's a big difference between an attaché and a worker. And then last year we implemented that, where over 120 students working, receiving a salary, minimum salary of 10,000 shillings in the industry. So there is another need, big need, it is the standards, because the industry requires standards. The industry will not ask for middle level people who cannot produce. And that is being addressed now by the ministry very well, but they need constantly see what are the standards. And then finally, we cannot forget 85% of the employment in Kenya is in the Yokali sector. So we can say 85% of our students coming out of vocational training is going to be self-employed. We need to give to the students entrepreneurship. It is a very important element. And cooperation with all allies.
Very well. Thank you.
And also a center of excellence that we talk about.
Very good. I'm happy with that. And before I direct a question to Brian, I just want to pick up on what you say, that 85% of the youth that are coming up are more or less Juakali sector. But I want to take a random assessment of the room. How many students are here? How many oil and gas practitioners are here? Whether technical, non-technical, how many are here? Very well. Good. How many are pursuing a degree level qualification? Very good. Very good. How many are pursuing a technical level qualification here in this room? So, Brian, is oil and gas that top heavy? How do we strike the balance? How do we incentivize the students to pursue technical level degrees? What is it?
I think it's very simple. I pay technical people more than I pay the people who sit in the office. Very simple. So that's how I'm going to incentivize. When I look at the students at the back of the room, I see dollar signs, because these are the guys who will be paying my pension, you know. And but the thing I told them when I was at Kenyatta University last week, and I asked them, when you guys were on strike, how many of you went to Tibet or something to add more arrows to your quiver? And the answer was 0. And I was very sad.
Yeah. Clearly, because there's no one here who's pursuing a technical.
So there's nothing wrong with getting a petroleum engineering degree. But at the moment, how many petroleum engineers will I need? Yeah, it is a pyramid, and you'll find that in our industry, it's a pyramid, and the petroleum engineers are at the top, but they're few. You don't need that many. You don't need that many reservoir engineers, geologists. What you do need are the guys who will be welding, driving your trucks, the guys who will be doing your civils, doing your well pads. So it's very bottom heavy. Even on a drill crew, yeah. You've only got one guy who is the chief drilling, and it's one guy. You've got your astronauts, your roughnecks. So it's a pyramid. But you look at the remuneration that is given, and people are paid well. But the one comment I'll make, and when you talk about local content, is I unashamedly, even when I go to the headquarters of Shell, I will always hire a Kenyan first, as long as they have the requisite skills. Because we are still in an industry that has the potential to kill and maim a lot of people. So you still need to have the relevant competency-based skills. But I always hire a Kenyan first, because it makes good sense. The economists will tell you, why should I bring a Filipino here when I've got a Kenyan? Here is cheaper.
But they're minimizing risk. I mean, they're investing in experience, but minimizing risk.
No, but in the short term. So a good example is I spent 3 years in Iraq. I had 20 Iraqis reporting to me. The first day I told them, every day you see me, see a massive bullseye on my back. Because in 3 years, you guys should kick me out of here, and I know I've done my job.
Good. How then, Prof, I just want to go back to what you said. Anyone who wants to take up a course in Moringa needs an assurance that there are jobs out there. Then how then do we strengthen local supply chain? How do we incentivize? How do we woo the students? Because clearly there's no technical person here. So it means, Brian, we're probably looking at oil and gas in this country in the wrong way. We're looking at it as being very top heavy, where in actual sense we don't need so many lawyers, oil and gas lawyers. We don't need too many engineers. What is your take from?
No, that's very, very true. Just like we discussed it in last week conference that was hosted by Kenya Pipeline Moretet. The idea is, I think we are going to have a mind shift. We should, and I think I like what Brian just said, that it's high time we start now labeling that people who are doing technical skills are being paid more than the engineers who are seated in the offices. Maybe that is one approach which probably would be radical, because sometimes we pay according to the education level. But then now coming back to practical solutions for our institute, how are we going to proceed? And some of the strategies that we have discussed as an institute is that let's partner with potential employers. For example, recently World Bank gave money to NITA, that's the National Industrial Training Authority, and we were subcontracted by NITA to train people in technical skills. Of course, the money the NITA pays per student is very little compared to the amount of input in terms of capital and all that. But the point is that NITA then goes another extra mile and says, okay, after you train for 3 months, I want you to train for 2 months, attach them for 3 months, and give them assurance of an employment, even if it is temporary, for 6 months. And many people wanted to bid, and people started walking away. So in other words, the answer to that is that probably also partnering with the potential employers, so that at least whoever we train can see some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of securing a job, even if it is temporary. Thank you.
Very well. I have one or two questions, but let me allow the audience to also contribute. Do we have any questions from the floor? Very well.
Good afternoon. Yes. My name is Job. Part-time with Distance College. I've people positive. I've been in the industry for almost 26 years. The welding, first of all with Kangen, and also with BOC gases. And the welding across the region. I've worked in Tanzania, I've worked in Uganda, I've worked in Kenya. It's appalling. We cannot industrialize with the kind of welding we're doing. Because exporting welding takes a very high level when you're talking about exports. The welding that is being produced from the Tibets does not meet international standards. We had a training course from one of our customers. We trained their welders, their diploma levels, grade 1s. If you see the initial, what they were welding the first day, it cannot pass. After the week, we were able to get them to at least 1G. And those are people who are grade 1 welders. How are we going to be able to take these opportunities that we are talking about when our training levels are very low? Because we need to train to NVQ, at least level 3. I don't think we have the capacity to train to NVQ level 3. Another thing I want to address is the industry, the welders in industry. Let's not talk about the training institutes, the welders currently in industry. The level is very poor. How are we going to get it? Is NITA going to be added more money to be able to incentivize the employers to be able to send their trainer, their welders, technicians for training?
Very well.
Thank you very much.
I think, Honorable PS, are the courses standardized? Who standardizes them? Do you work in partnership with the oil and gas actors?
Sure. So it's extremely important that everyone has to understand here that we are in a phase of releasing a legacy system of KICD and NEC. Okay. That's the legacy system that had challenges in terms of the mismatch of skills. We are now adopting a competency-based education and training system. So it's a framework. It's a framework that maximizes 100% involvement. It's a highly inclusive process, starting from the technical needs assessment, where we try to figure out how many welders we need, at what levels, arc, MIG, etc., and what sort of levels and operations are required. We then, as multi-stakeholders, go on to develop the occupational standard, which is benchmarked internationally. We consider local conditions based on our local context and requirements and what needs to be considered from all aspects, because it's not just a welder you want the person to have creative skills, attitudinal skills, and so on, and national skills.
Good.
We then develop the curriculum. The curriculum achieves the standard. We then develop the work integrated learning standards, the assessment tools, and so on. Tomorrow's assessment will be done in partnership with the industry. So it'll most likely be a welding association on different levels who will assess students. But this requires massive involvement. We've already seen involvement in terms of the development of competencies and so on.
Right.
These are internationally benchmarked, they're already being improved.
Mm-hmm.
But increasingly we need when it's high-level welding, we need the multinationals that are doing these mining projects and oil and gas projects to play a participatory role in work-integrated learning. And there's no way out. That's the only way in order to maintain and achieve the preparedness that's required by the oil and gas industry, but most importantly, to permeate the national system so that our entire national system raises its standards. So it's a dual opportunity. One, that you get immediate productivity and innovation capacities, but then you also inform the national systems, thereby what we always intended that these oil and gas and specialized industries would do. They would promote technology transfer and upgrade the entire national skills base and competency bases, thereby promoting industrialization. So it's a well-structured system, and previously you were not allowed to even interrogate the curriculum, be involved, and that's a far part away, and now we're trying to see how we're as inclusive as possible in all aspects of that occupational standard. So this is a huge dynamic change that I'm hoping that everyone starts jumping into and supports fully, because the demand's there, but we need active involvement, especially by those international multinationals which have the standards within their environment. Thank you.
Very well, thank you. There was another hand up. One from this one.
Sorry, speaking to Master Ceremony, the other question he had was that how does someone upskill? Well, these institutions will have the opportunity of not only building the competency, but also promoting upskilling to existing welders or those that have experiential. So it's recognition of prior experience to
Good, thank you.
Hello, my name is Consolata from St. Kitts Vocational Training Institute. And our school has been in existence for the last 23 years. And due to the market change and whatever is happening, we have had to adapt to a new training module called dual training. When we came to welding, we're trying to explore. We've seen that locally it's not so easy to get people who can train advanced welding. And we are able to collaborate with German Chamber of Commerce, and we got trainers. But the challenge is we don't have a certifying body in Kenya. So we've had to send the samples in Germany. But this is not sustainable. So we really would love to know the way forward.
Very well. Brian, can Koga take that up in terms of certification?
So I think certification is because you need a proper certifying body. So as an industry association, what we can do is to make sure that we are the guys who are the off-takers. So we're the guys who pull the demand. But our expectation, of course, is to make sure that the certification and the certifying bodies are accredited and meet a standard. So if I'm a welder here, he meets the same standard as the guy who's in Dundee, same standard as the guy who's trained in the Philippines. And our work is just to support, by pulling in terms of the demand, but also when the curriculum is being built up, is giving industry input as to what it is exactly we want to see coming out of that training. The good thing is we don't need to reinvent the wheel because the certifications are there for certain levels. I mean, the welders will tell you about the NVQ certification, the standard that you have to meet. So we're not reinventing the wheel, we're just making sure that our institutions are properly certified and the trainers of the trainers have the proper training to get them to that standard.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, Martin.
Thank you. My name is Martin Mohor. My question is regards to transfer of skills, especially from multinationals, and some of the challenges or hurdles that you face when it comes to transferring of skills from multinationals to the locals is the aspect of infringement of the intellectual property. How do we intend to bypass that?
Very well, thank you. I think, Mr. Andrew, do you mind filling that?
Well,
IP protection.
First of all, we send these two people to be trained in Scotland. We created a center of excellence for welding, and now we are training the people. And hopefully, there are like two standards of training. There is the academic training and the industry training. Industry training is the ISO or the Lloyd's in certification. That is possible to bring those people to do the training. And in this case, I don't see any infringing of rights, since you are organizing a training and giving us international certification. So, but I think it's an important point, the association, because you have several vocational training or industries involved. So the other thoughts has come very much on is to create sectorial funds to be able to train the youth. So if the oil industry said, look, we need so many welders, can they get together and create a fund that helps for the training of the youth? And we had the experience of passing this time to help and help administer the fund.
Okay.
So you have the loans can be returned.
Very well. As we're fielding another question, I want to direct one to Dr. Otav. I mean, knowing very well that TVETs are the whole function of the county government, and we do have at least the highest level of county government representation here. What has been the active? What has been the coordination, the linkage, the partnership? We have collaboration and coordination with the county government.
Now, basically, as much as the vocational training centers, their management have been devolved to the county governments, the overall regulation of all the TVET institutions in Kenya is done by TVET Authority. So TVET Authority normally does this through registration and licensing. So all the institutions within the country of Kenya, they must be registered and accredited, and all the courses that they do must be licensed by the TVET Authority. And this one is normally done based on the facilities that the institutions possess, as well as the staffing that they also have. So any institution in Kenya must only be allowed or must only be licensed to do the courses that it has got qualified staff and also has facilities to offer that particular training. So that is what basically the TVET Authority is doing. But just to add on that, we are also encouraging all the TVET institutions within the country to engage in both innovation and some research. And I can give examples of institutions that have been doing a lot of research, like RVJTI, Meru Technical, as well as Kisumu National Polytechnic. All of them are coming into the area of doing research in that area.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's field one from, yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask this question. So my name is Douglas Iremo. I'm a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers at KU chapter. I'm actually joined by the rest of the committee, and I'm just speaking on behalf of all of us. We have like 2 questions.
Okay.
And SP basically bridges the gap between the industry and the students who are pursuing this degree. So one of the panelists mentioned what exactly are the indirect opportunities in the oil and gas sector, and also looking at the current curriculum, like what we are doing in school at the moment, is it possible to ensure transfer of practical skills from those already working in the industries and students in training institutions? How do we ensure this transfer is actually seamless? And also, like it was something that Anthony Paul mentioned about how BP sponsored a program in university in Trinidad to create qualified graduates. So how can we also implement that in Kenya?
Thank you. I want to direct it to Malcolm in a nutshell. How does the oil and gas industry value chain look like? What are some of the opportunities and are there indirect opportunities as the audience has asked? The SP.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first thing that I think just to benchmark this discussion around skills is that Kenya has a human resource, a very good human resource base. And I believe by some statistics I've come across that oil and gas requires perhaps in the region of about a 20 to 30% skills upgrade to actually be able to be utilized in the oil and gas sector. Now, we could easily talk about specific skills like welding, for example, that are required in oil and gas, but then equally so, even as per yesterday's presentations, there's accountants that we needed, I think lawyers, we've clearly stated in this room and all of that, but then also other areas like food production and etc., hoteling, hospitality and etc. Now, in terms of the 20 to 30% skills improvement, there are some cross-cutting factors or skills that are required in oil and gas. Some of these would be things like quality assurance. They just want to be sure that the food quality is of a certain level. Others may be a little bit more, related to the technical, a bit more like health and safety, for example. That's needed across the board. So in terms of getting the broader base to engage in the oil and gas sector, there is always short courses, international qualifications, and etc. that can actually upgrade skills to be able to be utilized in the oil and gas sector. Apart from those specialist skills, which are usually a lot fewer within oil and gas.
Thank you. I want to wind this by asking the money man, rather the money woman, right? Are there benchmarks where if you get local content right, then the oil and gas industry will definitely improve? Do we have, I think the audience needs an assurance, especially from an economic perspective. Is there a beauty about embracing local content financially?
Yeah, there definitely is. There's a lot to be said and a lot of value to have in creating an environment and an ecosystem of essentially shared value, where not only does the local community benefit, but the national stage we benefit as well. If Turkana does well and it grows, Kenya grows as well. Turkana is not separate from Kenya; it's part of Kenya, right? So if we invest in local content, whether it's local squared, local cubed, or local, it doesn't matter at the point where we are investing in skills and development, not only of technicians, but we also need to get to the point where we're discussing skills at the MSME sector as well, because they are the drivers of the economy of Kenya. So if we have transferable skills where they can hire some of those welders, some of those technicians, Talo is likely going to hire a small business to provide some services rather than hire an individual to provide a service that it's just easier for them to deal with a business rather than an individual at that stage. They're not going to get to the point, no matter how much we'd like to think that they're going to hire every single welder we train or every single caterer we train. The better idea is to have some caterers, some food production technicians, I would say, get into a catering business together and then outsource that. Those are some of the indirect opportunities you were asking about before. So those are some of the ways we can think about it, and those are some of the things that the Landin Foundation has been working on and delivering for focus more on Turkana, but there's definitely a discussion on a national scene.
Thank you. I want us to give our panel a huge round of applause. Sorry, we've limited the focus time because we have the Senate Committee on Energy coming in the next panel, so we also need to make a bit of time for that. But all in all, I just want to wrap up what our panelists have said. That one, the curriculum is definitely rationalized in the sense that they are working with the industry towards making sure, already there are pre-established oil and gas certifications. So the Kenyan case is not any special. They are working with the industry towards making the industry better. And finally, I wish to draw in on inspiration from the degree, that you also need a bit of plumbing, you need a bit of electrical works, you need a bit of here and there towards making sure that you are finished for them. Because when he is out there looking for an employee, a potential employee, anyone who comes with an extra or an added advantage, Marianne, will definitely be considered. So with that, let's give our panel a huge round of applause.
Thank you so much. I'm sure you can agree. You know, when it comes to skills building, people usually have very strong emotions. But in this panel, you not only found the regulators, but you also found the people who are going to absorb the skills, and you got the people who've made the skills building into a business. So it was fantastic to actually have this fantastic panel, and a special thanks to the PS for making time to come and have a conversation with you. Are you feeling a bit more comforted about where our skills, where we are? Are you feeling a bit more comforted in terms of where the training and the thoughts behind the training? Or are you worried? I'm sure the petroleum students are a bit worried, don't we? The advice is simply be, I like Mohammed analogy, to add more arrows to your quiver. They're very good. My relatives from the west side would pick that one very quick. And now we are getting into the last panel session of the day. We really thank you for your indulgence thus far. And this last panel of the day is now we want to hear from Waishunio. Let me start from there. Okay? We want to hear the county level perspectives on local content. To take us through this last discussion, our panel discussion, is Miss Gloria Wawira, who is a legislative associate with the Parliament of Kenya. Karibu, Gloria.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Don't be tired. We are just about done. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And you had lunch. Yes, we did. Yeah? So I was thinking about a joke earlier today, an icebreaker, because I'm naturally a very shy person. And so I was looking for a joke, and then I thought to myself, I couldn't find one. You know why? Want to guess why? No. Because oil and gas is very serious. So it's about to be very serious. So the last session of the day is probably one of the most important, county government perspectives. As Melba has already told you, I convene the Senate Committee on Energy, and by virtue of our constitution, as Article 96, we are empowered to protect the interests of counties and their governments, you generally. So, on my panel today is Ms. Majala Mlagui, Deputy Governor of Taita Taveta County, my county, and an extensive advocate for local content. She has been in the sector for at least the last 5 years. Please give a warm welcome. No, he knows my tribe. Next to her is Senator Ledamo Olekina, the senator from Narok County, and an advocate for education. He is a strong proponent of TVET institutions in this country, and you're just about to hear about that. Thank you, Senator. And last but not least, Senator Fatima Jolo, I dare say the most punctual person in this room, and the first woman-elect from Northern Kenya. More power to the women. So, senators, and Madam Governor, we are going to try and keep this trip to script. Can I join you guys? Yes. Let me have the mic. Okay. So I'd like for us to have conversations, really. Just a conversation to close this day off. And I want to start by asking, what are your conceptions of local content? Today we have had local squared, and local cubed, as was said. What are your conceptions of local content and the roles that you play in making local content possible at the county level, specifically for the oil and gas sector? Do you want to start us off? Thank you. My name is Atuma Duno, Senator for Isiolo County, and Deputy Majority Leader Senate. Now, I wish I had like 2 hours to discuss about oil and gas, but unfortunately the time is very short. Now, being a representative of the people, I was told today the discussion was local square. Now, my position is, as it is right now, with the current legislation, with the current policies that we have in place, I think there are a lot of challenges. But if the current bill will go through, then we might have the local square we are talking about. Because if we have proper legislation and policies and proper regulation in place, the national county level to be involved. Because what we have currently, decisions are made at the national level. People come in with big machineries without the locals involved. And the people coming in, they are hostile to the host communities. And that is where we come in as politicians. If you come in, the communities are not consulted. The county government is not involved. Then that is where there is a big problem. So for me, if the current bill goes through with our input, where all the levels are involved, then we are going to talk about the local square. But without that, there's a challenge. I was here a few minutes ago where the discussions was going around saying that we have institutions that are actually training individuals to be employed in those big companies. Yeah? And I think one of the speakers said, yes, we have those institutions, but the practical aspect, we have those kind of institutions where after one has graduated, you need to be actually trained practically in terms of what you need to do once you are in those companies, or once you are working with those companies. That is the challenge we have in Turkana, where they need, at the moment, political high-level intervention for the locals to be involved. Can we move from there to make sure that at the point of intervention, at the point of application for license, how can the communities be involved? How do communities know that there is oil or gas in Isiolo County? How do I know as a leader? Those are the things we need to ask ourselves. Before we get investors coming in, breaking the ground, pushing the locals from their areas, and you don't even know what they do at that level. Yeah? Those are the questions we need to ask ourselves. Are the current legislation, or is the current legislation going to address those issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. My name is Senator Ledamo Akina from the great county of Narok. And I want to be a little bit pragmatic and also positive on the steps that we're making as legislators. We are sitting down, we've got an opportunity here. This is something completely new. And I'm one of the strong believers that if you build it, they will come. We are faced with challenges that we don't know about how to solve them. The best thing for us to look at is examples from other jurisdictions. We've got various, when you look at the policy paper, you will see what other countries have been able to do. For me, I know there's a challenge. And that is why I'm spending a lot of time looking at the local content bill, which is currently before the Senate, so that we can be able to interrogate it. Because whether we like it or not, our youth are now more informed than they were before. Yesterday, I saw it in the news, where even after the high-level political involvement on how the revenue is going to be shared, a group of radical youth said, no way, Jose. That oil will not be transported from here to Mombasa without us knowing how much is being transported. So I think I want to agree with my colleague that the companies which are coming in bring some sort of hostility, but what they don't know is that they are awakening a sleeping giant in hostility, the communities themselves. So the discussion that I believe we ought to be having is now, how do we prepare our communities to be able to embrace these new changes, to be able to prepare in terms of qualifications, in terms of jobs. What jobs can we practically give to our local people? When you look at the oil and gas industry, there are a lot of plumbing, a lot of technical jobs, a lot of electrical jobs that have got to be filled. And truth be told, like if you speak about the Maasai, because I have a feeling that we have a lot of geothermal in Narok, but I also believe that we have some oil there. I think it behooves us now as leaders, and even in the county government perspective, to start doing an audit of your skills that you have in that particular area so that we can be able to create these new jobs. So the challenge that I see that we have now is, are we ready to divorce our interests, personal interests, with the interests of our communities? And if so, then from a policy perspective, from a legislative perspective, we have got to bring all these aspects together, find a way to give proper public participation, and that is why we are currently, in fact, the bill on public participation, on the framework, how do you carry out public participation, is currently before the Senate. So I want to be a little bit pragmatic and also positive that I think we're making the right steps. It will be very difficult for us to achieve anything without proper legislations that will be able to guide us. Once we have these legislations, like now the one on public participation, then we now demystify it. We now educate our people on the grassroots level that this is what you need to do. Before this investment comes here, these are the processes that have got to be followed for you to be able to welcome. They also have to know what are these opportunities which are coming up. So to summarize there, I'll probably just say that I'm very optimistic that if we do or carry out our proper due diligence on what we are about to encounter, then we'll be very positive in the future of this country.
Madam Governor. Good afternoon. My name is Majala Nagui, Deputy Governor of the Hidden Treasure, home of Sagarite Green Garnet, that is Taita Taveta. Taking things from my senator. So the question is, what is local content? Is it local content squared, local content tripled? In Taita Taveta, I'd love to have the conversation about oil and gas, but the closest to oil that we will come to without jinxing ourselves is coconut oil. So we have to look at other extractive resources, and those are the ones that are locally found: the sand, the construction materials, the gemstones, and the base metals, the iron ores and the manganese. And for us, local content it's more than jobs. It goes towards what are the local communities, how are they participating in being able to build the projects that are coming up? How we as county government looking at the opportunities coming up and breaking it down in a manner, as Senator said, that we'll be able to understand what skills are required and thereby assist us in doing a skills audit within the county to understand what is the capacity we have for youth, our women, even persons with disabilities, and what do we need to start doing in changing, revamping, or even just strengthening the curriculums within our TVETs, within our universities. I think the same applies even with the oil and gas sector. I think the conversations have been applied to what are the revenues that we're going to get as a county and as a community, but what is it that is required to build an oil rig? What is it that is required to make sure that the community is able to bring the chickens to the workers who are going to be on the ground? What is it that is required to construct the housing for those workers? If I bring it back to Taita Taveta, one of the things that we're very keen on doing is linking up to the Big Four agenda. We saw last month the President launched the Big Four at the Devolution Conference, and there was all this talk of, or rather the vision of having 1 million housing units in the country built by 2022. What does it take to input? What are the inputs that are required to be able to build the 1 million houses? We're talking about affordable housing. That means materials must be sourced locally. Where is the local? Our communities, right? And that comes the local. What do they need to be able to supply the ballast? What do they need to supply the sand that is going to go to these affordable houses? How do we ensure that they're able to maintain and also supply the adequate capacity that is required to these projects, so that we're not talking about, for example, cement or sand coming in from our neighbors, which is a possibility. So when we're talking about local content, I'm more interested in seeing how we're empowering the communities to access supply opportunities more than the jobs, and especially from the local, or rather the more county level projects, not necessarily the foreign investment projects.
All right, so we have a consensus that local content is about enabling participation across the various value chains. Senator, you spoke to the need for legislation. Maybe you can tell us, as a senator and as a member of parliament, what initiatives are ongoing, and how will, for example, the local content bill that is with the Senate Committee on Energy empower or help to bring light into the local content conversation? Maybe Senator Ledama can back up.
Thank you. I don't actually belong to the Committee on Energy of the Senate, but I was invited in my own capacity. I don't know at what level the bill is, but as a member of parliament, once the bill is before the House, every individual, every member of the Senate can be able to contribute to it, and actually even amend in terms of what we have just discussed, to enable, to enrich the legislation so that it solves, or maybe it captures the issues we have on the ground. And again, after the first reading, the second reading, it goes to the committee for public hearing. And I hope the Committee of the Senate of Energy should be able to bring on board the county governments and also members of public and the communities living in those areas, so that they can be able to contribute to the bill and make sure that they own it. So as for members, you have a right to amend the bill and contribute to it and enrich the bill when it comes to the floor of the House. And again, the policies and the regulations that come after that, you can be able to contribute to it so that you can address the concerns we have just put on the floor of this gathering. I thank you.
Let me first of all state that I am a member of the Energy Committee, and that the bill, the local content bill, is currently before us for us to be able to initiate the public participation. And I would like to invite you all to come in and enrich that bill. I agree with my colleague that we've got to look at the bill, invite the mover of the bill, who is Senator Gideon Moi, and also maybe to shed some more light on the issues of that local. Because when it comes to local, you want to know how local is local. That's number one. I also agree with my colleague that we have to bring in the governors, the deputy governors, and also the communities to be able to now interrogate and add in their inputs. We at the Senate are currently working on various legislations. The only way we are going to really succeed is when we involve the communities for them to be able to know. I want to share with you that I've actually currently sponsored a bill which is called County Oversight Bill. And this bill is to ensure that the community from the grassroots are are part and parcel of the budget making process. That's number one. Once they get to know how their budgets are sort of like developed, they can be able to contribute in every aspect. Because you have the MCA, you have the governors. I'm sure the governor sits down, they have their budget, they share with the MCA. But if you now bring it down to the local people, they'll be part and parcel of the whole process. Now, on this aspect of understanding what is required, we also need legislation. We just got back from Italy, where we were enlightened on different approaches that different companies take before they invest in a country or before they participate in a tender. I think some of the things that we can be able to borrow from, let's say, a company like NL, is that in the tender making process, you've got to look at, as part, 30% of the tender has got to focus on, before you award that tender to a particular company, you've got to look at and see 30% focus on local. So every investor coming on the ground is able to invest and ensure that 30% of his resources will be targeted towards the locals. That one we can support with legislation. And I think in this local content bill, we'll have to ensure to input an aspect of the tender process and demand that every company which is coming in and investing has got to have a certain percentage being left back in that community. So when we tie this with legislation, that is the only time that I believe we can be able to make progress.
Deputy Governor, what is your take on the role of legislation in enabling local content?
So there's a huge role for legislation. However, the other question that we should also ask ourselves is who's going to enforce the legislation? Who's going to ensure that it's actually delivered on the ground? And senators talked about a county oversight bill, and that's one of the tools that I know they use to smack us on our hands as county governments, or even guide us in delivery of our functions. One of the things that I've found very interesting in my tenure the last year is we formed devolved government in 2010 through the Constitution. It's no longer new. And in 2013, the new administrations came into place. Schedule 4 very clearly stated what functions were devolved and what functions were at the national level. One struggle that has existed throughout national government and county government delivery of services is how those functions have been unpacked. There's certain places where you get legislation saying that this is a national government function. However, when you look at the actual enforcement and delivery of services required by that legislation, you must have significant involvement of county governments. Now, if you're not having the conversation with county governments together with the people on the ground, it means that the budgets that are required to be able to deliver on the legislations that have been developed or formulated are non-existent. So while we may say that we want, for example, just using the example here, 30% of jobs on the ground, what do county governments need to do to empower the communities to be able to access that 30%? Does that mean an increase in our wage bill because we require additional social service officers mobilized around the community to be able to empower them on the services that are required? So I think it's very important to understand how this legislation will be unpacked from a national government perspective and a county government responsibility aspect.
All right, thank you. While we are on that point, what county governments can do, would you probably share with us how county governments, specifically Taita Taveta, has contributed or is contributing to adding value in your extractives sector?
We have very comprehensive plans about how we can add value to the extractive sector, not only within the gemstone sector, but as I mentioned previously, the construction minerals sector. The county has a County Mining Act, which I contributed to during my days prior to being a deputy governor. And we're looking at how we can enable that piece of legislation to be enforced in terms of providing a county government opportunity in investing in the mining sector. in the extractive sector. We're looking at how we can develop mining zones for both construction and gemstone minerals within the county that will then assist the communities in being able to access the opportunities that exist in mining. We'd like, as much as possible, to have a streamlined and coordinated manner of public participation. As was mentioned previously, there's a very high tendency of, for example, an MCA going onto the ground and saying one thing, a group of lawyers, because I know there's a lot of lawyers in this room, going onto the ground and saying, Haki yetu, you're not meant to be doing this, please tell your MCAs and your governor that this is what needs to be happening. And then finally, you have the county government and national government through the Ministry of Mining and Petroleum, perhaps, coming in and saying another thing. So there has to be a coordinated manner of engaging the communities, of engaging the investors, to not only provide information that is adequate to the community, but provide that enabling environment that is required for the investor to make adequate use of the resources that are on the ground. The other thing that we're very keen on doing is building up the capacity for value addition in terms of mineral beneficiation. As Taita Taveta County Government, we're working with the Taita Taveta University through the Center of Excellence in Mining, Environmental Engineering and Resource Management that is supported very strongly by the German government through the University of Freiburg and University of Applied Sciences in Dresden. And we're looking at how can we create the necessary practical skills that are required to be able to extract as much value from the minerals that we have, both from the gemstone perspective and minerals such as iron ore. Finally, we're also looking at just selling ourselves, well, so not selling ourselves, selling the opportunities that exist within the sector. So how do we get people to understand that it's very viable to set up, for example, an iron ore crushing plant around a certain area because there'll be certain licenses coming up? How do we start setting up the value addition for gemstones that is required to, for the artisanal miners, so they're no longer selling the raw products into the international market, rather doing it locally and being able to sell it to the audience that is in front of me. So there's a lot of work that we're still thinking through about the main deliverables, particularly because we're constrained with funds. But I think, as someone said here, money follows function. Once we have that sorted out, the money will definitely come in.
I'm sure Senator Ledana will help you with that.
Please bring more money to county.
Now that we're speaking about money, we cannot have the conversation around local content without discussing the percentages. Just a few weeks ago, we had the 75-25, and Senator Ledama used to it, and we have the provisions of royalties and revenues that come from mining resources. What plans do you have, or what plans do you think counties can implement to help use these revenues to accelerate or to enable the participation of local companies, county-grown companies across the local content value chain?
I think before I address that point, I'd like to maybe just add on a little bit, or maybe clarify one aspect of what can counties do, or what do we expect. As a senator, what I would like to see done by my county government of now is to adopt this principle that if you build it, they will come. We used to have very, very good polytechnics, you know, and we know very well that for every one engineer, we need about 12 technicians. I think what we ought to be doing now, and this is what the county government needs to be thinking about, there's a lot of funds or grants which are allocated to county governments. This county government needs to empower their polytechnics. It is not about increasing the wage bill. It is about assessing the skills that you have locally so that you can be able to increase or enhance those skills so that when we have these extractives, you are able to satisfy them locally. So that is one issue. The other thing is that we must involve the public. We don't want a situation whereby we are setting up huge white elephant projects where, you know, it's only you who knows what they're all about, and the public do not know about the revenue. Educate the public on what they're actually about to encounter. People need to know. You know, we are running businesses. We know that sometimes you might say you're making about your turnover is about 10 million shillings a month. But you've got to know both sides of the balance sheet. You've got to know your expenses. How much, what are your expenses versus what is your profit? Because sometimes we may be actually attacking, we might attack the investors, yet we don't know how much they're spending in terms of their inputs for them to be able to recover their money. So it is important that we as legislators and also policymakers and people on the ground to fully appreciate that by the time we come up, and this is what the president said, and I support him for that. By the time we come up and we say, okay, Turkana will get about 25%, the county government will get 20%, the local people will get 5%. Let us now define who are these local people. This 20%, where will it go? And it will not help Turkana County, for instance, or even Taita Taveta County, whereby when they get this 20% revenue, they channel it into other projects. What they ought to do is to look at the gap. Because I've looked at other countries, and I can't remember which country, I don't know whether it is India or it is Norway, where when they had a lot of these extractives, they didn't have the skills necessary there. So they adopted a policy where they invited those companies to come, but those companies have got to establish institutions to train local people. So let us not fight. Let us look at our example and say, what is it that we have? Because right now you tell me that you need a plumber or you need an electrician. There's no way you can definitely get an electrician who can be able to support the oil and gas industry in Turkana, because standards are different. So we need to first of all ensure that we have the right standards. So if it is this 20% of the revenue, let us standardize. So that when you are trained in India, for instance, and someone is trained in Narok, you have the same skills. But if you go and train somebody in India, and then here you're training somebody differently based on what is available locally, the person coming from India, and he is a local person, because if he comes local, he's from Turkana. When he comes back, he's not able to perform his job. So this revenue share, we have to admit that we're a country of about 45 million people. So 75%, it's okay, let it go to the rest of the country. But this 25%, when it is here, county government must really sit down with their own people and determine what are the priorities. And in my view, the priorities are to enhance the skills so that you have more jobs locally than having to import them. Thank you.
Senators, I'm told I'm time bound. Sorry. The ladies and gentlemen in this room want to talk to you. As we wind up, must be employment, or do you want value or revenues of a certain quantity from those jobs? So what measures, just as a general skill, what measures can county governments employ to measure the outputs that are coming out of local content? Do you want us to count how many people Tula Oil, for example, has employed? Or how then can county governments measure?
Now, before I go there quickly, as a country, do we have an institution, or maybe institutions, that are actually training capacity of their graduates to be able to be employed in those institutions? For example, the investment in gas and oil. That is a question we need to ask ourselves. And secondly, the issue of market. Once they graduate, are they really going to get the jobs? Because I know there are some international, international companies that have trained students in China and in other countries so that they can come back and work in this line. Now, for the purpose of benefiting from investment of oil and gas, and of course I know Isiolo is one of the counties that there's a possibility of gas being available there, and other minerals. For me, there must be a difference between the revenue that is going to be actually given to the county government after investors come in. Secondly, employment. Of course, for a driver, you cannot bring in a driver outside the country. You cannot get a cook or maybe a sweeper who can be actually hired out of the country. Why can the locals be given the jobs that they can be able to do there in those counties? So for me, there must be availability of jobs that is given to the counties. Secondly, the revenue must be shared between the investors and the locals. And I think those are the things we need to bring on board, and maybe even ensure that the legislations and the policies that are coming in should be provided. Thank you.
Any sentiments or measure?
I think it is very clear. And for me, I would not want to focus only on the low-level jobs. You know, I want to look at it from a complete, wholesome approach. Because we are pushing so much revenue into local, or rather the devolved governments, set up institutions so that if it is a technician to work in Tulo, let him be training in Turkana. That's number one. Number two, there's a big industry. There's food that these people are going to be eating who are working there. There are mamas who can be able to supply that food. Don't import that food. Number three, if it is drivers, I agree with Senator Dulu that source them locally. So to answer your question, it's very clear. It is both jobs, and I think during the devolution conference, we talked about this aspect of county government doing an audit of their skills, the skills which are available locally. Because if the government, if the president is talking about the Big Four agenda, let me tell you, this problem of local content is going to become even bigger. Because many of the skills which are available in Narok are not sufficient to be able to set up a high-story building. And maybe we might see a lot of projects mushrooming. I mean, like big high-story buildings. Maybe the guys locally there. So I think the county government can now start by creating a database of all the fundis that we have locally, all the plumbers that we have locally, all the electricians that we have locally. Then you are able to assess them, spend some money, you know, that you have, and then, you know, standardize and say, okay, you need this additional support. So that when we talk about local, it can truly be local. So let us not look at outside. I don't want to see a Chinese, I don't want to see a local person. In fact, I was against Maasai people being sent to China to study how to come and become customer service people in the STR, which is passing through now. I mean, seriously, we can actually train our own local people, locally here. And that is why Matiani was saying the other day, that how do you have a site manager? You want to tell me that you cannot have a site manager who is Maasai here? You know, I mean, seriously. So those are the things that we need to look at it. Look at us. Actually, it is these guys, the county government, the deputy governor, the governor. When you live here, go set up a you know, what do you call it, a database there of all your county workers, where their skills. And then if you need more money, come. Fatuma and I will help you be able to push for more money.
Right up. I'm glad I have very many witnesses with my lobbying. For us, local content is both the quantity as well as the type of local content. So if we're saying 30% of jobs need to go to the local communities, 30% of procurement opportunities need to go to the local communities, but when it comes to jobs, for example, what is the scale at which we're saying that 30% is going to the local community? It shouldn't just be, as Senator has talked about, drivers, it should also go all the way to the managerial posts. And we understand that for some of them there has to be some form of progression and scale that is employed depending on when the project and the type of project that we're talking about. But there are some things the Senator has mentioned that we must be able to stand firm on our ground and say this is available locally, then you must be able to source it from the counties. And and Kenya in general.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, your panelists, your last final panelists, we will be taking in questions. I see Mr. Jerry over there. I see a gentleman next to him. Please, carry on.
Thank you very much, Senators and the Deputy Governor, for that wonderful engagement. You have helped us open our thinking. My concern is actually what you have been talking about. When I think local content, the first thing which comes to the mind of a Kenyan is I'll get employment, I'll be able to supply. We forget when you are looking for employment, there are unskilled, labor, skilled, and specialized. When you are thinking of supply, there is what can be found within, what can be found with, is it without? And what can be found internationally. All these things now comes to complicate the mathematics when the investor runs on campus. He runs in Turkana, the true oils are there. There has never been any other company mining oil in Turkana. So, the proponents of that investment are very careful. If they get it wrong from the word go, the project fails. So they are looking for the expertise service. Where will they get it? In Turkana. So, if you are looking for somebody to do the manual jobs, you can get. I also don't expect them to get them from elsewhere. Why am I saying this? I'm from Kenya Chamber of Mines. One of my members is now being antagonized by the counties. He is looking for, there is an opportunity for employment. They have done the recruitment, the interviews and the like, but the person who appeared to be number one, the best out of the many, is not from that county. The county says, no, if you employ from this county, forget. We will chase you away. If we start it wrongly, we will miss it all the way. And we have nowhere else to look for this. Another problem comes now because we are talking of all this. These investments, they are finished. If it's a mining project, you're mining gold deposit, it may run for 5 years. Those people who you have trained, they have to go to another county where there is a mining deposit or a mining project. When they get there, they find these counties as in our own people have to be trained. It becomes now another standoff. So you find our Kenyans can start finding it very difficult to look for greener pastures. We need to think this. We need to be very careful. We need to look beyond now. Thank you.
As a gentleman in blue.
Thank you very much. My name is Hamza Mohammed. I'm from an investment company in Malaysia, but I'm a Kenyan. I think you guys are legislators here, and you guys are the people who are making the rules for the local content. So I want to throw in something. Before I start, as you say, there's a drivers actually who are not Kenyans, and there's chefs who are not Kenyans. And the thing is, example, like in Malaysia, when someone wants to work, the first priority should be given to the local person. Example, while I was applying a job in Malaysia, it was very hard for me to find a job there because every job I applied to, it says priority Malaysian local citizen. And I think as a legislator, you should put that criteria, saying to the international companies in Kenya or any company, you should first hire local Kenyans, the talents here in the country, rather than getting from abroad. Me as a Kenyan, lived in Malaysia for more than 15 years, it was actually hard for me to find a job in my own country than finding a job in Malaysia. Actually, it was easier because First, I graduated, I came back to Kenya, I want to find a job anywhere I go to have an experience. How will I get an experience when I spent 4 years in university? Does it make sense? I don't think so. So what I want to ask is there any kind of legislative that you guys are preparing that gives the Kenyan youth the ability to get jobs faster than someone coming from Rwanda or any country, sorry, coming to Kenya and trying to get a job, and because he has an experience, he can get a job. The second thing is, as I think the senator mentioned, is the minister, Fred Mitiangi, if I got his name right, the video that got viral. If that video did not get viral, do we actually know about this thing exists? Even if it exists, for example, does he have a special committee that can target these companies? Example, as you saw in the video, is a site manager who came all the way from India to get a work permit here. But is there a committee that are specialized and say that, okay, let's look at these international companies, see people who are they hiring, and who are we offering the work permit? If you're offering the work permit to someone, a job can be found in Kenya, someone in Kenya can do the job. Do you think that is useless actually, because someone can do the job in Kenya? So I just want to repeat that question again. What kind of legislation are you doing for the youth? Especially youth in this country, they're very quiet. I mean, in Malaysia, we're very vibrant. And you know, when I came here a few months ago, and everyone is quiet, youth are being very quiet, they cannot get a job very easily, they're complaining every time. And asking you, the people in power, that we gave the power to, what can you do for us?
Thank you very much. These two gentlemen here, my dear, and the gentleman in the pink shirt.
Thanks a lot. My name is Wendia, and my question goes to all the panelists. And when you visit these counties and you interact with the businesses in the counties and the activities going there, my experience has been that the counties themselves are not necessarily using the people of the counties. And the examples quickly that I can give is go to Turkana, go to a nice hotel, and usually you're being served by people from outside that county. You go to Kwale, again we have lots of hotels in Kwale. And in a study that we did recently, again the story is the same. You find that you're being served by people almost 100% from outside Kwale County. The supplies are from people who are also outside Kwale County. And the same repeats itself. I'm sure you go to Narok, go to Masai Mara, perhaps you find the same kind of scenario. Whereas I'm not advocating for counties legislating that all people must come from here. I think this observation kind of shows what is the spirit around here. Are the counties developing people in their own counties to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that exist outside the door? Or are the counties only waiting for when the natural resource industry comes, and that's when we say, oh, you must employ people from our county? Why is it that when I go to Turkana, I go to a restaurant, I'm served by people almost entirely from outside Turkana County, and then when natural resource comes and sets a restaurant next here, I am told that now you have to employ 100% Turkana people. What are the counties doing about that? That's question number one. A very related question is the question of enterprise development, because the same scenario is repeated in enterprise. Generally, you find that even the county headquarters themselves are getting supplied almost entirely from outside the county. What are the counties doing, or what is the intention of with the counties to develop the local businesses, to be able to at least first to supply them, so that when the foreigner comes with a big project, you can say, we have businesses here which can supply you, and we develop them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad I have in the panel, the right people for me. I think I'm really looking forward to being in a forum where you are. Now, there is a bill which is called the National Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill. It really picked up and people pushed it and then it just died off. And I remember we were really going to Senate and the former senators, it was sponsored by Senator Zani from Kwale. Yeah, because I remember I used to work at the Council of Governors, and I used to go to Parliament to defend the position of the counties. And senators really were on our neck saying, you guys, you have enough money. Why are you again, you are just going to waste this? And then it just died off. Now, just recently we are seeing Turkana is going to get 5%, 20, and then 75. That's for Turkana, somebody saying Kwale is going to take 10. So what I'm seeing here is that every county or every resource is going to get its own formula. Yet we have oil saying in Nyakach, we have the mining in Makala, we have Kakamega. Is every county going to negotiate? And every county going to go to Parliament, to State House, to negotiate their share? Because if it is like that, then I will just ask Senator Dulo. I have to do a lot of research in Isiolo, and I love Isiolo. Are you also for this formula which is being proposed by having the locals being employed first because of the nature of the population? Because I remember Isiolo County is the most multi-ethnic county I've visited, because there is Turkana, there is Borana, there is almost everyone, even Luos, most hotels there. You see Luos are the managers. So, how is this to you? Because when you are talking about local content, somebody said that once you have been given in the formula 5%, then that counts for the local, because you have been compensated for the land, compensated for what, and then you get the 5%. Now you are still coming up with another law requesting for more opportunities. Is it too much on the investor?
All right, thank you. Senator, Deputy Governor, you want to begin?
Yeah, well, when I have the mic, I have thank you all for the questions. I think I want to start with the last question, now that it's fresh. I know it was targeted to the senators, but I have a bit of input on there. When we're talking about the division of revenue, the 70-20-10, that's on the basis of royalties. Royalties are based on production. We're nowhere near production yet in some of the sectors. So even as we're talking about our rights in accessing those percentages, we still are very far from being able to reap those benefits. So what are we doing about what is available to us right now? Having said that, it's still very key to be able to develop instruments that both county governments and the communities can then absorb these revenues that are going to be coming through to the ground in due course. From the county perspective, it's important to be able to have both an expenditure framework for the revenues coming in from mineral production, and from the community perspective, there needs to be some form of sovereign wealth fund or instrument that is set up that means we're not spending the money right now, which is what we're all looking at doing, and I don't think that's the smartest thing to do, seeing as these minerals are finite. From the mining perspective, unless something changed recently, the Mining Act specifically states that royalties will be shared 70-20-10. Therefore, there won't be any negotiation, as far as I understand, from a county perspective. So if in Nyakach you have gold and in Taita I find my gold, we will not be negotiating, as far as I understand. However, on oil, it's a different conversation. So there needs to be standardization, as you've mentioned. And on our front, with multiple natural resources such as wildlife, we're also looking at Senate to say we require the assistance on lobbying on how we can get the support for the revenue coming in from resources such as wildlife. Taita Taveta has 62% of it demarcated as the Tsavo National Park. We receive nothing from it. What can we do so that we can ensure our communities and the counties are empowered from the revenues coming from that? Wendia, thank you for your question, and I'm proud to say that I worked with Wendia on the study that he talked about. It was in Kwale, and it opened my eyes about the things that he's just mentioned about the locals accessing opportunities that are there within the companies that are setting up within the regions. And I think one of the things we have to ask ourselves as Kenyans is, why do we have such a great sense of entitlement? We are very happy to sit down and wait for a Chinese Turkana to come and set up in Taita, for example, and then start talking about haki yetu, yet we're not necessarily stepping up to the challenges of being able to capacity build our own people. That might be a controversial statement, but at the same time, what is it that we're doing for our own selves to step up and take up those opportunities? From a county government perspective, we realize that that issue has been both from the administrative perspective as well as the development partners that are engaging with us. Most recently, we were working with one of the development partners in implementing a gender mainstreaming activity that had a component of economic empowerment for the women. Now, we were told that we can only consider agro-business, i.e., we set up a group of women, 10 of you, let us buy you chickens, let us get you eggs that you can then sell to your local kiosks. And I said, well, I'm a mining county. I'm a tourism county. I want to be able to empower my women to understand what ecotourism is. I want to be able to empower my women to understand how to cut a gemstone that will simply go on to the tourists that are walking around our county. But I'm still told, no, you need to give them chicken and eggs. So we also have to understand what are these conversations that we're having amongst ourselves that will then ensure that we're enabling our community people in the right manner to exploit the opportunities that exist in front of them. I think I'll stop there for now.
I will try to be very brief and straight to the point, and I will start from where the Deputy Governor has left. Narok County. Before it became Narok County, we had Narok and Kilgoris. And one of our biggest resources there is our wildlife. What the defunct county councils did is that they set up 19% of the local revenue that comes from Masai Mara to benefit the local people. That is still in effect until now. So 19% of all the revenue that comes from Masai Mara supports those communities that surround Masai Mara. Number two, Mondia spoke about something which I think I can relate to very well. Just a few months ago, we had two incidences. One was with the SGR, where people were brought from Machakos to come and work in Narok. And when the community realized that the jobs which these people were coming to do were jobs that did not require any skills, they rioted, and actually we ended up losing one person who was shot by the police. The same problem happened in Kilgoris. There is a sugar company. But here is where our problem is. Our problem is that, first of all, we the Maasais were so proud, my friend. There are jobs we just cannot do. You know? So that is the problem we have. So the first thing we need to do is to tell our people that these are opportunities. In Kilgoris, the Transmara Sugar Company there, the management were telling the people, look, why are you leasing your land to the Kisses? Just because you cannot till this land, we are giving you everything. We are giving you the seedlings. We are giving you the tractors, the implements. All you're supposed to do is go and stand there and watch. So another issue is a cultural issue. So if we really want to move from one step to another, we're not going to pass blame. And that is where I tell this institution, look at it, these communities have got no capacity. So what I request you to do is this, and this ties in to a response to the gentleman from the commerce, that every company coming here must have your current plans and your future plans. If it is in mining, and you want to leave Narok County to go to Makueni County, you need to start training people in Makueni County. So that you 12 years down the line will not have any more going to mine here. but they don't train people from where they're going. So they expect that once they take people from Narok, they'll be accepted in Makueni. They will not. The other issue has got to do with a gentleman from Malaysia. I lived in the US for 19 years. And I started my company. But before I could even employ somebody, I had to satisfy the labor department that I have sat in the entire United States of America, and I could not get someone who can be able to take that job. So what I'm saying, I think Matiang'i is on the right track, and we need to take you on that. From the county perspectives, we need to first of all ensure that those investors who are coming to work in our counties can be able to certify that, and they make it public, that in the whole of Isiolo County, they cannot be able to get a plumber before they bring in a plumber from another county. Otherwise, we are going to be able to fight. So, in a nutshell, it's an issue that we have to entrench into our tender. Most of these companies which are coming to work here, the Chinese companies that we're giving work, we have to really narrow down to the tender and say, when we're giving you this tender, you have to factor in the training of locals, even before you start your work. First of all, train them so that you certify this 30%. Then by so doing, we'll be able to balance our current needs and our future needs, and we'll also be able to balance this issue of local, local, local. Thank you.
Thank you. I think for me, if I may go to the guy from Chamber of Commerce. Sorry, Chamber of Mining. Now, you are complaining about individuals being given employment and build capacity. I think, with all due respect, we are not asking for too much. Yeah? Because you are coming to mine in our counties. And we are not even actually measuring what you are mining or exploring. And the small thing or the little thing we are asking for is employment and build capacity. And I think we cannot actually forgo that, because that is the standard practice everywhere. So, if you cannot get locals who are able to do that job at that particular time. What we are asking is maybe build the capacity of the locals so that they can take up from the foreigners. Yeah, those are the things we are asking for. And secondly, for the young man from Malaysia, by the way, there is a government policy where the 30% of all employments within the counties are supposed to be given to youth and women. It's only the enforcement that is a problem. And I think we will be able to sensitize members of public to enforce that by going to court and also through other initiative, which is like civil society. Again, I'll go to the gentleman who talked about if the non-locals are working in hotels and we are forcing the investors to employ the locals. I mean, honestly. The county governments are given leeway to employ 30% outside counties. In the event that you cannot be able to get the professionals who can be able to serve in those counties, you are given leeway to employ from other counties. But you cannot say, because the counties are employing non-locals, then the investor should also bring in international employees. Yeah? We can't do that. Because the locals in Masai Mara, who are Luos, who are Turkanas and the rest, they're Kenyans. Yeah? And the international communities, they have jobs for themselves in those international countries. We cannot allow that. Yeah? So we will be able to provide legislation that says this percentage of employment should be given to locals, and this percentage should be given to non-locals. In that way, we can reach some consensus. And I think we need to harmonize the national law and the county law, because some of the counties, they have already established mining acts and other legislation. So we need to, harmonize the national and the county level so that we can have one legislation that is balanced within the country.
Thank you, sir.
Finally, supplying food and all that stuff. Honestly, we have mbogas in Isiolo. You cannot say that you are going to bring in mbogas from wherever, China or wherever. I mean, is that realistic, really? Just simply because some counties are getting supplies from outside. It's not possible. So I think you must benefit from me and I benefit from you. That is the ideology. I thank you.
All right, thank you, Senators. Deputy Governor, we are very tight-bound. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. Please, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much for your time. Maybe in conclusion, to the gentleman in the pink shirt, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, sir, the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill lapsed with the 11th Parliament in the National Assembly. However, the reason it lapsed was in favor of sector-specific quotas. So the same way we have 70-20-10 for mining, and we are having 75-25 for petroleum is what they lapsed in favor of. And in the case of petroleum, it is not that the 75-20-25 quota is specific to Turkana. It will be the provisions in our current petroleum bill. So then you'll have 75% going to the national government, 20 to county governments, and 5 for community. So it will not vary by the county. It's going to be a legislative provision. For the gentleman from Malaysia, that is the essence of the local content bill, that you will have preference quotas. Most of private sector, I see Tolo smiling at me, is against quotas, but the essence of the bill is to encourage that preference be given to local companies, local employment, local opportunities for enterprise, etc. In general, thank you, gentlemen, for your time. And we will release the panelists. Thank you so much. My name is Gloria. I hope you're not too tired. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we just agree that it's incredibly difficult to get senators,
exactly. That's what.
It is incredibly difficult to get them all together, right?
Yes.
And can we all agree that it's been an utmost privilege?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And what's lovely about when you talk to such an esteemed panel, it comes from the heart. Did you feel that?
Yes.
There's not many shadows and big money, not too much. It comes from the heart. So whether you agree with them, disagree with them, at least you cannot disagree as to the motive. It's fantastic to see. Thank you so much. I think there's gold in Narok.
Yes.
I'm giving you a shout right here. There's gold in Narok. This morning we are challenged to think about being entrepreneurs. So I'm giving some young people here some opportunity. So what I'd like to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is close the session. It's been a long day, but a productive day, okay? Yes. I'd like to thank each of my moderators. I think we cannot agree they deserve a round of applause. They asked tough questions, they were engaging. Our panelists were also fantastic, and they showed up. Thank you. We'd like to thank the government of Kenya, of course. Please put this in bold. From PS Kamau, who gave us fantastic leadership in the morning, all the way down to our senators, although the people referring to now everybody else as governor. When it's the governor's turn, they say we're not government, it's somebody else. Either way, thank you. You have the flag of Kenya behind you, your government. We thank you for coming. And of course, National Oil, our partners. We also want to thank each of our partners who have their banners here, from ESTA, National Oil, Oxfam International, Kenya Civil Society Platform, for all your support. Each of them has contributed in kind and in cash towards making this happen. We don't take it for granted. The role of the Extractives Baraza, ladies and gentlemen, is to facilitate conversations amongst yourselves. Okay? We put you in one room and we have a conversation. And hopefully after this we can all have a beer There's somebody who said they have money. Hey, did I get that from? I'm looking for the after drink. But in any case, we will not make this such a long session. It's simply to say asanteni sana. This is the second of the conversations. The third dialogue session will be on environment, health and safety. And we will need you once again. And that one in particular, we really want to make it community-centric. Because usually if there's anything environmental, communities are usually the first ones to be impacted. So we'll be contacting you for your partnerships. On behalf of Strathmore University, Oxfam International, who have convened this forum, and on behalf of our chair, Kimbra, who was here this morning, on behalf of the ministry that is chairing the Technical Validation Committee on Local Content, tunasema asanteni sana, kwaherini, we will be in touch soon.